Okay, let's get started. Okay, just a couple of housekeeping items before we dive in. You will notice that you are currently muted, but definitely we want to know and hear about you. If you want to drop your comments, questions during the session in the chat box, you're welcome to. Also to let you know, the session is being recorded. As always, we post this session and the presentation in our website. So if you have to miss a little bit of it or you want to repeat and check at your own pace, please feel free to go into our website to the Product Safety Educators group, and then you will be able to see all the presentations, previous presentation that has been posted. As I said, please make sure that you can use your chat and drop your questions. We'll be happy to try to address them or pass them to our speaker today. Let's get started. Okay, so we are absolutely thrilled to continuing this Educators Call. This particular series in English, it's made possible thanks to the funding from the Local Food Safety Collaborative. Also, huge thank you to you all for participating, for engaging, for letting us know what's your current needs, what you would like to hear in these presentations or in these meetings, and to join and to continue supporting PSA, of course. And talking of the agenda, I'm going to introduce you our speaker. I'll do a quick one. This is Betsy Bihn, who most of you know, but still good to introduce her and let you know a little bit more about her. She's going to then talk of her presentation regarding crisis management in the farm. And then we'll have some time for questions. Finally, we're going to wrap up with PSA updates and upcoming events. Now for introduction, I know you know her. This is Dr. Betsy Bihn. She's a prominent food safety expert. She is also a senior extension associate in the Department of Food Science at Cornell University. She's currently leading the Product Safety Alliance and the National Good Agricultural Practices Program. And she focused her education in balancing research and current information to make sure that we transfer and translate the information we have from science into action items for the farms so they can either comply with FSMA or comply with their certifications. As it says there, she feels fortunate to work with people that are truly committed to improving food safety in the farms. She's hoping that today we can expand all the thinking about how to support our farmers, how to support the farms where we work with in their food safety journey. Her education includes, she holds a PhD in food science from Cornell. She is also holding a master's degree in horticulture from the University of Florida, and she also studies zoology in Ohio State University. So welcome, Betsy, and the floor is all yours.
All right, we're going to switch over so I have control of my own destiny. Hopefully that works for everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, sure. Mariana, for the introduction. Always kind of weird to have somebody introduce you who you work with all the time, every day. But it's I really appreciate being here to talk about crisis management and how it fits in. This is something that I want to share from an educator's perspective on how my thinking is evolving about our presentations and our trainings. And this need for a crisis management fits into that thinking. I want to talk about steps to help growers develop a functional crisis management plan and talk about how it supports the farm. I have a few slides about food safety culture, which I've been thinking a lot about as I see it really impact farmers in both good and bad ways. And so I wanted to talk about how we make that culture positive and not negative. I do think there's a difference. For any of us that have ever stepped on a farm with a negative food safety culture, I think you know what I'm talking about. Josephine has her hand up. I don't know if that's an accident or not. So Josephine, maybe put it in the chat, but if your hand stays up, we can stop here in a second. Okay. I created some input and interactions, and I'm hoping you guys will participate. So this is my heads up to you. By the way, I'm expecting you to participate as we move through these presentation. So I think where I'm evolving with my ideas about putting presentations together is less talk and more action. This is based on evaluation data, also based on interactions with people, that's forcing me to rethink how I'm creating educational materials for growers and how when people invite me to make a presentation, sometimes they'll invite you and they'll say like, oh, we don't care what you talk about. Those are maybe the best invitations from an extension standpoint because then you feel like you can tackle something you've been wanting to tackle or address something that is a concern that has been coming up over and over again. One of the examples I'll give you for this is, as you guys know, the PSA training is 8 to 5. And oftentimes people are like, oh, the training's too long. It's 8 to 5, it's 8 to 5, it's 8 to 5. So Donna and I were working on a new workshop for post-harvest water and sanitation and traceability. And so we purposefully made it 9 to 3, right? Make it a shorter day, give people time to get there in the morning. But it was a lot of hands-on, right? It had them out of their chairs, very little talking, very little PowerPoint, but a lot of moving around. Do you guys want to know what the evaluation said? Anybody want to guess in the chat box? I wish it was longer, too short. Bingo. Thank you guys. That's exactly what they said. It needs to be longer. We need more time. Now, hopefully Josephine can hear me, but anyway, she can. Thanks, Mariana. Yeah, it's exactly what they said. It needs to be longer. And that to me is a signal of something, right? It's a signal that maybe it's not about the time, it's about what that engagement is providing for them. Okay. So anyway, I've been feeling really compelled to be concise but thorough. So less is more, I guess, is what I'm starting to think about. Make sure what I'm covering is maybe targeted and much more thorough. I also want to acknowledge that a lot of evaluations really uh, really, if you get somebody who's a good storyteller, and I will just say, Don and I recently trained with an extension educator from New York who had great stories. And those really resonate with people. So I want to make sure that it's not like you don't want to cut off that, but you also have to be careful about what you're putting out there and how that information is really seen. And then building interactions. I think when I first started, I always thought interactions had to be super complex and super involved. They don't have to be. Just sometimes the little interactions can be very meaningful. And I think that's another thing that's in my evolution of thinking. I also think I'm getting less afraid of dead air. So when I'm talking to people, we oftentimes say within the PSA team, give count to 10, give people that space. I've actually done, I don't want to call this real research, but I'll tell you, if you pause for 3 seconds, nobody's going to jump in. If you pause for 10 seconds, they usually jump in about around second 7. It's a weird thing. I just sit here and count and pay attention to who responds. But I think that's something we need to think about from an extension point of view. And then I still gather feedback. In this original, I've done a version of this. I changed this up again, so it's not what I did before, just fair warning. But when I was piloting this, or the first time I was using it, I just created a QR code with a really short 3-question survey, and I was amazed by how many people responded to that. The growers like totally gave me their feedback, totally told me like this was great, change this. Again, it wasn't long, it wasn't involved, but it really gave me an idea of how to tailor it. So this presentation is based on concern from growers that I'd worked with who had different crises and watching different ones travel based on how prepared they were. And so I just wanted to share that kind of background because this is the educators group, and I'm hoping that would be useful in thinking about it. So when we think about what is a crisis, I pulled this definition out of the dictionary. Crisis is an unstable, dangerous, or pivotal situation that disrupts normal functioning, often occurring suddenly and requiring immediate decisive action. Represents a turning point for better or worse, involving higher levels of stress, anxiety, or emotional, cognitive, or behavioral inability to cope. All right. So again, requires this immediate response, may persist for an undetermined amount of time. Is it a short crisis, long crisis? What are we looking at? It can be natural, staged, accidental, or deliberate event. And I have a slide coming up where I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but it impacts the farm. And usually a crisis does not impact a farm in a good way. In the 26 years I've been doing this, there's only been one crisis where a grower was like, that worked out really well for me. And that had to do with actually a foodborne illness outbreak where he had something available that wasn't available nationally. And so his farm actually sold a lot. And so that's one in 26 years. The other ones have not been so fortunate. So what I wanted to ask you guys to do in the chat box is if you'd be willing to share a crisis that you or the farms you've worked with have experienced. Flooding. Yep. I was thinking about that one for sure. Thank you, Anna. Fires. Yep. I have some pictures of that. Great. Flooding's been a big one recently for a lot of us working with growers. So thank you guys for putting that in. And the fires, again, I have some pictures. So, ooh, recalls. There you go. Oh, good. Possible outbreak, health issues. Yep. Yep. Good. Super. Truck accident. Thank you guys. You're hitting the ones. You're hitting the ones. So I'm glad this is something we've all had to navigate. I'm not glad we've had to navigate it. I'm glad we all have an understanding of what we're trying to navigate. So when I think about this, you'll see here that the crises are likely to happen on farms. Accidents, we already had somebody say tractor accident, machine entanglements, chemical spills, health events, heart attacks, strokes, somebody else mentioned that. Catastrophic fires, floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, food safety issues, purposeful adulteration, and deliberate actions. Let me say this. I chose these specifically. This order was not random. And the reason is because although I think being prepared for a crisis really does serve you in a foodborne illness outbreak, I think most of the time growers are going to be dealing with accidents, health events. Those are the things that I see happen more commonly, right? Ice raids. Ooh, I did not put that on my list, Annalisa, but that is a good one. Yeah, so that's the key thing. And then being prepared for this crisis really helps limit the impact to the farm. And that's really what the goal is to limit those negative consequences. And there's ways to prepare, right? Developing a plan, communicating the plan, practicing the plan. And again, proper planning prevents poor performance. Again, those 5 Ps. So the other thing is, here's a QR code. And this QR code is going to take you to a worksheet. And one of the things that I did in developing this was I developed a quick worksheet for growers so that as we go through this, they could fill it out. And at the end of this presentation, at least have an outline of what their plan might look like. Thank you, Bia, for putting the link in too. So really, this part talks about Q1 or question 1. And really, question 1, if you go to this, what you're going to see, question 1 simply says, I have a crisis management plan, I don't have a crisis management plan, or I'm in the process of developing a crisis management plan. And really, the purpose of that question was to get growers to say right off the bat, oh, I think I'm prepared, or I'm not at all prepared, or I maybe have thought about it. One of my favorite things that came out during one of these trainings was a grower said, well, I don't have a plan, but we do pick a name out of a hat and say, what would happen if Ted died? Right? And I thought that was fantastic. So internally, they would say, like, what does he do? And what do we do if he's gone? And what was funny is I asked the farmer, did you ever pull your name out of the hat? And he's like, no, actually, we haven't pulled my name out of the hat, right? So he's identified other people in his operation, but not himself. And I thought that was really a fascinating discussion. So when we think about a crisis management plan and what we want to put together, I'm going to go through each of these, but a management team, training for the team, for farm personnel, and then this nebulous media training thing, which I think is important. It's not nebulous. For me, it's nebulous because I've been trained in media training and I'm still not good at it. So that's why I think it's nebulous. But I think it's really important that somebody get media trained because it's really a skill set. The farm operations priority list, a critical contact list for the farm, a list of farm resources. Oh, I noticed I just made a mistake there. I combined two of those. Anyway, and a crisis management process. In terms of fires, you can see the bottom picture. I will tell you, I had never seen a combine go up on fire until one year when I saw 5 of them go up in flames. I don't know if it was just a dry year or what it was, but it was a strange thing to see a combine go up in fire. And when you know how much combines cost, it's a lot of money, and it's also very dangerous when the tires explode. So there's a lot of things that we need to be prepared for. When I think about assembling a crisis management team, I think the team needs to be small, nimble, effective, and responsive. And it's got to have people with authority to make decisions. If you have people in your operation that don't handle stress well, probably not good people to put on that crisis management team. But maybe they can go get food in a crisis. Maybe they're listed as the person to support the crisis management team, right? You're going to need food, you're going to need drinks, you're going to need things to be done that aren't always high stakes. So you have to think about who fits and why they fit into the situation. They should represent critical areas of your business, right? Have somebody from the field, have somebody from the packing house. Make sure all of your areas are covered. And you don't need to limit it to employees. Now, there's a caveat to that, right? If they're outside people, are they paid? Are they always available? You got to think about those kind of things. But you might want legal people, industry people, people that are better at communication. And we're going to talk about some of those people as we move through this. And you want to communicate and confirm the participation if you have people on this crisis management team. So what I'm getting at here is if you have a team and you don't tell people they're on the team and you have a crisis, they're not going to be prepared because they're not going to know they're actually on the team. So you got to communicate that. I put the QR code again, didn't realize Via would put the link in just in case somebody missed it the first time. This gets to Q2, which really just helps growers walk through who should be on that team, right? Who are people that should be on that team? When we think about conducting crisis management training, I'm thinking about it really in 3 different levels here. One, the crisis management team itself. They have to have a clear understanding of the plan and the process that happens in a crisis, right? They got to know their responsibilities within that process, right? Why did you pick them? That's really important. But I also think it's important for employees outside of the crisis management team. You have to have a plan. First of all, train them. This is what our plan is. These are the people on the team. Here's who is going to contact you in a crisis. Here's how we're going to manage that. Why is that important? I don't know where all of you work, but have you ever been in a situation where there's something going on and nobody tells you? And then by the time they get around to telling you, the misinformation has spread so wildly, nobody actually knows what's going on or who to trust or what the actual information is. That ever happened to anybody? In the chat box, if this has happened to you, you can put, yes, this has happened to me. So I think that is that's an issue that we have to think about. And this can happen even in the smallest of operations, right? So if you have a crisis, you want everybody to be in the same loop so that they feel informed, so that they can also help. That's the other key thing. And then when you think about media training, a crisis is 24 hours a day, and you're going to need somebody. Oh my, that's a good one. Bad roommates didn't tell me they tested positive for COVID. That's a pretty one that should have been communicated. That is a crisis. You have to manage the media. And I will say this, where can you get media training? That's a great question, Anna. And we've been talking about this because the PSA team, most of the PSA team has not been media trained. And this has been a discussion within our group trying to figure out where to get good media training. I was trained years ago when an extension educator brought in a person to do training, and then I forwarded it to more people, and we did it, but we haven't done it in a really long time. So that's a great question. And what I learned from media training is it is a skill set, and there are rules and lessons and things like stick to the message, answer the question, give an answer, but don't give too much away, right? There's all of these little skill sets that go with it. And having that expertise, at least a person on the farm who knows what not to do, is really valuable. You might want to hire an external expert who helps you, but you got to have somebody on the team who can handle that initial flush. And again, it's not just newspaper, TV, and radio anymore. It's this online presence. And how do you deal with that? And that is much different than the training I went through years ago. So when you talk about media training, what you're trying to do is limit that bad interaction from taking a small problem and making it huge. A good media interaction can actually have a positive impact on a bad situation. A bad media interaction can make it worse. It's a very complex landscape. Again, I don't at all claim to be an expert here with the online world that has changed things so dramatically. And if you don't know, if you don't know an answer to a question, you need to say, I don't know. That is one of the things I learned. I also learned that no comment is a terrible thing to say. That's what my training taught me, right? Better to say, I don't know, I'm working on it, than to say, I don't have a comment, because that just leaves them to fill up that space. And you want to be prepared. And in some cases, you can have things drafted in your file, in your planning file. And what do I mean by that? It's easy to draft some language that's like, we just found out about it, we're working on it, right? It doesn't even have to be very specific. And you want to make those key points. So in the chat box, how many of you have actually had media training? Has anybody had media training? I know Anna asked, where can I get it? But has anybody had media training? And if so, is there any key point you took away from that? Okay, so great. Annalisa, question. Can you talk about media training would be useful? Okay, so for instance, in a couple of the farms I've worked with, even when they had somebody on the farm had an accident, and they came out of the office and there was a camera crew there. And I don't know why the camera crew showed up for an accident, but maybe because the accident had the farm name, maybe they were in the area, but they stopped by the farm and it really caught the farm grower off, caught them off guard, because it had been an accident, like a truck accident, and it shouldn't have been a big deal, but somebody stopped to ask them questions. So you never know where it's going to show up, certainly with things like outbreaks or if people get sick. One of the other ones that's really interesting that growers have said is, if you're a local grower, I'll use cabbage because we grow a lot of cabbage in New York. If you're a cabbage grower and there's an outbreak in cabbage, even if it's not in New York, they oftentimes will show up at the farm asking for comment, right? So it's those kind of things that you don't even have to be directly involved with, and we've seen media reach out to growers for comment. So that's an answer to that. Carla, thanks. Some universities have communication assistants, great, where you can get it. All you say is there forever. Think about it first and in what ways it can be interpreted. That's great. Thank you, Maria. That's a great piece of advice. Don, speak in bite-sized statements to help them find quotes instead of making them digest the information. Yep, yep, yep. And I think Maria and Don are getting to the same point, right? Be careful about what you say and how it might be interpreted. Putting things out in small bites is really helpful, so people have something they can quote without making it too complicated. Thank you, Don. Controlling the message. That's exactly what I'm getting at. Thank you guys for that. A few months ago, it's maybe even more like 6 months ago, I don't remember exactly. I think it was IFPA had a webinar. I should have written down the webinar, but Dan Barber presented on crisis management. And I copied this slide from him because I thought it was really helpful. If asked, respond even if you're not ready. Okay, and again, here's sort of this prepared statement. We're aware of the situation, are currently focused on learning more so we can provide accurate information and resources to both the media and the public. If I can take down your contact information, we'll get back to you, right? This isn't telling you anything. This could be used for any number of things. But I think the point is it gives you a response. It helps you control the message. And I think that's a key thing to take away. I don't want to linger on it too much, but I do think the media training is important. And this gets us to Q3 in your worksheet, if you're following along, that really just asks things like, What kind of training are you doing? How are you going to train all the people, the committee, the crisis management group, your employees, and what are you going to do about media training? So the next thing is to create a farm operations priority list. And here, what I'm really getting at as an overall thing is what on your farm needs to continue even in a crisis. I will give you a for instance. If you are somebody that is a diversified farm and you have animals and you have produce, your animals, if not fed and cared for, could suffer, could die, right? So somebody has to take over at least the watering, if not the feeding of the animals. The other one that came up that I added because of a grower input was payroll, right? They had one person who knew how to do payroll and they got stuck in one of these travel shutdowns and they couldn't make payroll. And that's a real problem when you have people that need to be paid every week, right? So you have to think about that, like what needs to be done. How often do they need to be done, right? With animals, you're going to need to make sure they have food and water daily. But other things like payroll, maybe that's weekly. And think about those things in advance. What can be ignored or delayed and for how long, right? You can delay some stuff, but you got to know when it clicks in, right? So you have to think about that. And who can assume responsibility for your operations? Is it other employees? Is it family members, close friends, neighbors? Again, a grower that I know that we wouldn't have made it our first year farming got really sick. And it really was the neighbors that picked up and ran with it when they were really sick. My friend has told me, she's indebted to those people, right? Because they really stepped up and they really took care of things when her husband was really sick. And so thinking about that in advance, who you think you can depend on, I think is really important. Um, and external support. Maybe it is somebody that can be hired. Maybe you know a pool of people that you can pay for that. But the key thing is to think about it. That's what I'm encouraging here, is to really think about what are those resources and what can you put off. And this gets us to Q4 in the form you're looking at. It's also important to identify resources and a critical contact list for your own farm. So what do I mean here? First of all, identify resources you have. Some operations have AEDs, some don't. Some operations have personnel that are trained in CPR. People on your farm list also happen to be volunteer firemen, knowing who's trained to deliver first aid, to deliver CPR. We had a fire, in our family, we had a tractor catch on fire, which then caught the fields on fire, which then started burning towards my in-laws' house. And it ended up that what saved the day was a tractor and a disc, right? So they disked around the field that was on fire and essentially created a break in that fire, which saved the house and the barn. So you have to think about that. Like if there's a combine that catches on fire and then catches a field on fire, what are the resources I have and how would that work? Right. And we were lucky. It was locals. It was not our family that did it. But it was great to see those resources and it made me think differently about resources. And when you think about internal as well as external people, who are other people that might be important to be on your list? Buyers, suppliers. If you think you have a foodborne illness outbreak or you think you had some contamination or a chemical contamination, maybe it's important to talk about where that supply came from. Lawyers, right? If there's really a problem where a lawyer needs to be involved, industry or trade group representatives. I know a lot of trade groups offer help to growers in crisis, right? And so having those names, knowing the emails, knowing the phone numbers, how do I reach these people quickly, right? And media experts, if this isn't your area of expertise. This gets you to Q5 on your form. And developing a crisis management process. And the key here is not only do you have all these pieces and parts, but now how do you put them all together to make it make sense? So first of all, what's your plan to contact and gather the team? Okay. And I talked about having a team, but now you need to think about how do I get in touch with everybody? Um, I don't know about you all, but I have 4 people on emergency bypass on my phone. When I go to bed at night, that's not true, 5. A friend's been sick. She's now on my bypass. But I go to bed at night. My phone is not going to make any noise unless you're one of these 5 people. Okay. And if I were on a crisis management team, or if I was organizing a team, that might be something I ask the people on the team. Would you be willing to add us on a bypass? Now, you're only going to use that number when it's an emergency, right? But you have to think about if it were the middle of the night, how do I reach these people? Um, I think it's insane to sleep with a phone in your room if it's going to ring all night or ping all night or make noise all night. That's not something I would ever do. But but there are certain things that have that emergency bypass for me. You also want to identify tools, and the other thing the growers mentioned was knowing what chat group, right? A lot of people use WhatsApp instead of a text message. So what is it that everybody's using and agree on what that's going to be? Again, one of the growers, again, in one of these trainings was like, oh, we have WhatsApp group for a lot of groups on the farm. Not everybody's on any one of them, but they're all for like the spray crew or the pick crew or whatever. They have them all organized. And so they were talking about how they might use WhatsApp to do that instead. Identify tools that help you assess the situation, right? What are things that would be helpful for you to look at a crisis and say, how do I figure out, one, how to stop the crisis, right? How do I limit what's going on? How do I limit the crisis? Once the crisis has been limited, then what are you going to do about the communication or the cleanup or anything else that happens? So again, think about those tools that might be helpful depending on the crises you can imagine. Outline how to inform all farm personnel so they know there is a crisis, right? What's going to be the communication again to everybody on the farm? So everybody's informed and you're not only battling a crisis, but battling misinformation, right? Because that's a whole different thing you don't want to battle. Develop a strategy, launch a response. Here's what we're going to do about the problem we're having. Make sure you monitor that. How's it going? And then at the end, you really want to do an assessment and figure out how do you recover? What did you learn? How do you limit any of the negative things from happening again? And how do you promote the things that actually worked well? And this brings me up, this would be Q6 in your handout. And this brings me to the value of a positive food safety culture. And I'm not going to talk, again, there's like 2 slides on this. This could be its own presentation. But a positive food safety culture establishes a team you can count on even when things are tough. Farms with this positive food safety culture are nimble and can make changes when it matters. And let me just say this. COVID-19 really changed my thinking about this. And the reason it changed my thinking about this was I got to watch farms that had a positive food safety culture quickly adapt to new requirements. For those of you who may not be aware, we are in New York State. New York State was one of the first states to have a full across the board shutdown. And then when they started coming back in, they had a lot of requirements if you wanted to open your operation up. The growers that had a farm food safety plan already in place, they just retooled that thing, redid their training, made modifications. It was lower stress, less trauma. I don't want to say no trauma, but those are things that are really positive to everybody. Farm owner, employees, customers, all of that is a plus. And several of them reported having their best economic year during COVID. During COVID, right? That's shocking to me anyway. And when asked, they were like, oh yeah, we're going to keep those changes. Why? because the farm worked better. You had a more consistent number of people in your farm store at the same time, which meant they bought more while they were in there, which meant they had a better experience, which meant your farm personnel weren't overloaded with 100 people 1 hour and 4 people the next hour, right? So they tried to really keep these changes because the actual experience at the farm was better. And again, I think that's because they had this culture in place and they were able to retool pretty quickly. And when I'm talking about a farm food safety culture or a food safety culture, this is what I'm talking about. Again, I took this from Intertech. Shared values, beliefs, norms that affect the mindset, behavior towards food safety throughout your organization. It's a result of commitment from leadership. I really want to stress that. If the farm owner and leaders are not committed to this, it's not going to happen. It really does require that. And it is a focus across the entire organization, right? Where everybody's included. So what are the key thoughts as I wrap this up so that we can talk about some other updates that the PSA has and get us out of here on time? A crisis can occur at any time. Preparing to me is really, really important. Again, the experiences I have had have been more related to head-on collisions, heart attacks, strokes, fires. Food safety is one of those things. And when you have a possible outbreak, as somebody mentioned, somebody says they get sick, how do you handle that? Knowing and having that plan ahead of time is critical to making it manageable. And it's so important to the farms, their families, and employees. I just think it's critical to everybody, and it does support food safety and other farm goals. So that gets us to Q7, which is the last one on the worksheet. Just for you guys, did I overlook anything in thinking about crisis management? For those of you who have thought about this, do you look at this and you think, well, you really forgot this big piece? Because I am interested. This is definitely a step outside of what we normally talk about. Sorry, Carolyn. She just had one. Her electricity went out. Oh, that's a good one. Insurance options. Yep. Thanks, Tamara. Other ones?
I'm gonna open my mic because I can't.
Yeah.
I think preparing for the emotional load that will come after the crisis is solved, and the mental load that will come after the trauma, something that we still have to will deal with within the team.
Right. That's actually a great one. That's a great one. Yeah, I'll happily weave that in. That's a good one. Thank you. Yep. That's a great one, Annalisa. Leaning on those SOPs that you may already have written, and if you don't have them written, then write one. But no, that's also a great addition in terms of navigating using things you already have on hand. That's a good addition. Thanks. All right. So one of the things I did want to mention here is, as you guys know, PSA funding this year was cut significantly, and we lost a few people because of it. We've been able to keep other people because we've had other grants and stuff. So I did want to let you know that we have been pushing some of our output under the National Gaps Program website again, just so you're aware of where some of this information is going. We still obviously use the PSA website for PSA specific stuff, but I did want to give you a heads up that we were using the National Gaps Program website for a lot of stuff. Thanks, Lillian. Keeping records is also important, right? Identify state and federal regulators in advance. Get to know them if you can. Yep, always good. Relationships are really important in an outbreak. And I appreciate that, Michelle. For recalls, do exercises to make sure your team works. Absolutely. That is one we absolutely talk about. We talk about traceability and making sure that plan works. And how do you know what's out there and how do you get it back? Thanks, Maria. All right. So, Mariana, you want me to just keep rolling and do these updates?
If you want to, go ahead.
Okay. I did leave time because I wanted to make sure we could cover them. I didn't want to run us up against the thing. So I guess first I'll stop before I do these. Do you guys have any questions? Because that's the end of my presentation. I can go back. Or anybody want to unmute or say anything? Or you're like, no, I just need a coffee. Quit talking. Oh, Michelle has her hand up. But I can't do anything. Mariana, I think you're in charge
Yeah,
of,
I'll do
you've
it.
got the power.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michelle. You should be able to
Okay,
unmute and yeah.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Well, this is old tech, but when I was working with the university, we did a lot of research with freezers that contained all our research materials. And we had a freezer failure one time that made us put in an alarm system. So if it failed in the middle of the night when no one was there, it would auto dial several people. And I was number 2 on the list. And my advice for any kind of auto system like that, if you have one, set it up so that it repeats the message until the person acknowledges having gotten the message, because it took me listening to it at least twice at 2 o'clock in the morning before I realized what the call was.
Yeah, that's good. Understanding that people aren't always functional in the middle of the night. Certainly
Yeah.
not expecting it. Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing I worry about because again, I just turned my phone off and you're not going to get anybody. I'm not going to hear anything unless you're on one of those 5 humans. So
And have more than one point of contact in case the first person's not reachable.
absolutely. Backups. I think that's the hardest thing for some of the smaller farms is they don't have, I mean, their farm's so teeny, right? How do you make a committee when it's a committee of one, right? So I think there are certainly challenges for some smaller farmers. But again, I maybe should have said, I didn't say this, so it's not a again. I do think even small farms moving forward with outlining some of this stuff is so important because if things do happen, having something to guide people, having people know what your expectations are really important. Anything else?
Well, I think as educators, the message that I get is to try to instill at least the idea of being prepared for this and thinking about it and sharing resources like the one that you just shared. Because as you said, we and growers in general try to be as independent, as functional, always on time, always doing what they have to do and more. So probably they don't sit down and think about what will happen if I'm not there to do this. And not because they die, I always think like, what if they all of a sudden decided to move to Africa and start saving chimpanzees? But yeah, you have to consider what will happen and sit down. And so if we at least instill this idea during our trainings to, hey, why don't you go check this resource and then think about your contacts in your phone who's there for whenever this happens, I think.
Yeah, that last one is a great one, Mariana, because one of the growers was like, I got everybody on my phone. I said, who knows your passcode besides you? And he's like, nobody. And it's like, yeah, handy dandy thing that's going to be. But no, it's a great, I appreciate your feedback on that because I think it is a really important thing for growers. In the eval that I did, again, that very simple evaluation, there were, I think, 23 people in one of the groups and like 22 in the other and only one person had a plan. The rest of them did not have a plan. So again, the one gentleman, the pick a name out of the hat and you die guy, which I thought was hilarious and really helpful to the group. They clearly had thought about it. They clearly had thought what happens if something happens, but they just didn't have anything really written down, right? So people might have done it in some way, but just not in a formal way. So. All right. Well, thank you guys for that feedback. PSA updates. We did the PSA grower training pilots are complete. Thanks to all of you who volunteered and or participated. I looked at some of the names. I know some of you are in there. overall, the positive was feedback, but there's lots of edits to be made. I know the PSA team, we went through some of them yesterday, and we're going to continue as we try and get that ready. We do intend to have it complete by the end of August. Our funding for next year has been communicated, which means hopefully we're going to have additional funding. We're not going to be so cut as this year. The objectives and the funding are not yet in place. Read that to be we haven't settled on objectives, and the funding is not here. So I'm assuming it's going to come in September, but it's not here. PSA priorities request will be reopening the lead trainer and the top portals, because we've gotten a lot of feedback from you all that you really need some lead trainers and you want the portals open. So we've already communicated that with FDA. I assume launching V2 will also be a priority, given all the effort we put in this year to get it finished. If there are any other priorities you would like to see, you can put it in the chat or unmute to share. I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to give us an opinion on that. And I apologize, trainer of trainers. Thanks, Don, for clarifying my unwritten out acronym. Any other input from y'all? Really embracing the silence today, people. You're making me use my skills. All
Well,
right.
this silence, in my opinion, this silence is great because it means that we have not been underserving people this year, even though.
That's good. That's good. All right, Mariana, I am handing it back to you.
Okay. Let me share my screen now. So thank you all for being here today. I'm inviting you to our next Educators Call. This is going to be Dr. Shirley Mikulev from University of Maryland. She's a professor there, and she's going to be talking about giving us her insights on bacterial persistence and dynamics on fruits and vegetables. This will be on June 25th. As you all know, the registration will be available through the email that we'll be sending to you in our for our list contacts, or contact list. And then the registration is also shared through our social media channels. For those of you who use Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Constant Contact, please follow us there, and then you will see all this news information that we share. If you're not in our listserv and you want to join, and you can use those two QR codes that we have there on the screen. If you want to hear this presentation in Spanish, Julie, my colleague Julie and I, we're going to be presenting this in May 27th. We're going to be translating exactly this presentation that Betsy just delivered for Spanish educators. And we'll be posting those again through our in our website, in the Spanish website, in social media, and also sending it in our Spanish educators contact list. So once again, we welcome your input. Please let us know what you would like to see on these meetings, what topics, or your suggested speakers. It is always great to hear what's needed. We actually took all your questions or your comments from this registration of this webinar, and we took all these seriously, and we're trying to find those speakers for you. But if you have a speaker in mind for the topic that you want to see, that's also great. Please share with me. There's my email, or with any of the team members that you normally communicate with. That's fine. They will all send a message to me. And then, of course, the PSA website, there is both websites. We have one in Spanish, one in English. You can always find us as Product Safety Alliance. And thank you so much for joining today. And we hope to see you in the next one. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. And if not, have a great afternoon, night. Thank you.